Here he is. Hi, Nathan. Tonight, Nathan's going to be explaining all about lighting, fixtures, different types, how they're rigged, and their uses within the theatre setting. We hope that it's very useful for you. I've known Nathan now for a very long time. He's a colleague of mine who works with us at the Barbican Theatre. He trained when he came through university, and he got involved with us in a big way, and now he works with us on a regular basis as a freelancer. So I'd like to welcome him, and I'll like to basically first of all say that if anyone is watching this film and you are partially sighted, or I'm a white male, I'm wearing a black t-shirt with the words ReBels on it, and I'm in a dark theatre space. Nathan Benjamin is a mixed race male. He's wearing a blue cardigan, and he's stood on stage with all the lights and the big space. So I will let him take it away now.
Hello, yes. As Jamie said, I trained separately for university. I trained as an actor at Plymouth Marjon University, and then through work with the Barbican, I found a love for technical and ended up moving across to the tech side of things. Today's masterclass is a continuation from the previous masterclass that was late last year, but you don't need to have attended that to understand anything what we're about to say. I'm going to try and explain everything as I go along in terms of any terminology I use, but if there is anything that I whiz past and I miss, please do pop it in the chat, and Jamie will be monitoring that so that we don't miss anything. Today's masterclass isn't going to be a ridiculously complicated, in-depth look at every aspect of theatre. We just don't have the time for that, and also without you here being able to play with the lights, it's potentially a long session if I did do that. So we don't want to bore you. So I'll try and keep this as short as possible so that we don't run into it. I suppose the first thing is we're going to go through kind of what is a fixture, all the different types of fixtures, the kind of main groups. We're then going to look at kind of how we use them in different settings and why we use them. Quite briefly, we're going to touch on that. And then we're going to move into reading lighting plots and eventually rigging the lights actually up into the theatre. I'm not going to go up a ladder. We've set up our own little bar down here. Of course, with COVID-19, we are, Jamie and I, the setup today has been obviously very socially distanced, and everything gets cleaned, and we've been wearing masks all day. So it's been perfectly safe, but having the lights in the space will make this a lot easier for you guys. So I'm going to turn off my camera, and I'm going to quickly switch over to a slightly wider camera that Jamie has, so that we can, it's just going to be a bit easier for me to show you all that we have. First of all, we're going to just talk through kind of what makes up a fixture. So all of these fixtures that you see here, they are all different types of fixtures. They all have different uses. And today, hopefully by the end of this, you'll kind of have an understanding as to what these kind of do and why they're so different. They are all black and they all look, and they're all made of metal. Surely they all do the same. They are very, very different, and we'll go through all the differences as we go. All fixtures, almost all fixtures, especially generic ones, so ones that aren't movers. So you can get fixtures that can move independently and they can reposition themselves. We're not going to look at any of them, partly because we don't have any here, and partly because that in itself is a whole nother topic that we'd have to go down. But generic fixtures are consistent in what makes them up. And as I go through later, as I go through the different fixtures, I will point them out that they do all share the same similarities. So at the very top of this fixture, so this is a 1K ETC source for Fresnel. Again, that was its full title, and I'll explain what all that means as we go along. But at the top here, we have what's called a clamp. Now the clamp basically is our way of attaching fixtures up onto the lighting bar. So a lighting grid or a series of lighting bars in the theatre are made out of scaffold pole, and they're circular. And so this C-clamp quite happily fits a 48.2 mil scaff pole in it. You don't really need to know that in terms of its sizes. You don't need to memorize the sizes of the scaff pole. The industry standard is that the scaff poles in lighting rigs 9 times out of 10 will be that kind of size. So this is a special kind of clamp, and I could go into what kind of clamp it is and kind of how it's got cool features, but unless you're a tech, you probably don't care because it's quite a nerdy part of the job. So that's a clamp. All these fixtures, with the exception of one of them because I didn't put a clamp on it, has a clamp. And this clamp can be removed and swapped out for a different type of clamp depending on the setting that you're putting it in. So this particular clamp will work brilliantly with our lighting bars. But if you were to come across smaller lighting bars or ones that have different dimensions, then you can get clamps that are specifically designed for that. Moving down, you've then got this metal bar, which is how we can position or how we can lift or lower the fixture once it's up in the rig. This is called the yoke, Y-O-K-E, and it's present on most fixtures. Most fixtures have them, and they vary in size depending on the fixture and also kind of what it's meant to do and whether it's meant to be able to fit all the way through. This one cannot because it's stopped by its handle. But some you can flip it all the way up the other side. For example, the birdie, which I'll go through a bit later. Moving on from that, we've got probably the most important part in terms of health and safety, and that is the safety chain. This is basically a load-tested piece of cable. That means that if for whatever reason the clamp fails or the yoke decides to break, this is rated in order so that if the fixture were to drop off the bar, this prevents the fixture actually falling and injuring someone at ground level, which is very important. For example, this rig is 5.5 meters tall, and for those who are from Marjon, which is my other place of work, our rig is just over 6 meters up, which means that I'm sure you can imagine something quite hefty and heavy and metal falling from that height has the potential to really injure someone. And so it is practice in all theatres that there is safety chains. The reason they're called safety chains is because they used to actually be linked chains, and that they were also load tested. They've kind of been phased out for this much stronger and more testable piece of wire, because the chains, well, you know the saying that it's only as strong as its weakest link. It would mean that you have to test every single link and load test it all. Whereas this, you can test the full strength of the whole cable, and you know the whole cable is that strength. Up next, we've got the lamp housing. Now, on this, they're in different places on different fixtures. This particular one is at the bottom of the fixture, and all this is basically where the lamp and the reflector is held. So in most fixtures, there is a reflector and there is a lamp. So I can take the lamp out, and here is the actual lamp. It's very important you don't touch the lamp. That's because you have different oils and greases on your hand, and leaving an imprint, even no matter how slight you touch it, leaving an imprint on it can reduce the lamp life because the oils and the greases burn or they heat up at a different temperature to what is optimal, and eventually you'll blow the lamp, which is less than ideal, especially when it is 6 meters in the air. You don't want to have to, every 2 seconds, be going up to change it because you decided to touch it. So when we're changing these lamps, we use tissues, we use gloves to make sure that our oils don't touch the actual surface. This, as you just saw, gets slotted into a little slot. I can't show you because it's inside the fixture, but it's basically a reflective panel called a reflector that, no, I'm not going to be able to put this in now, that guides the light out the front of the fixture. So as you can imagine, like a light bulb in your house, the bulb actually sprays light basically in all directions, and the reflector just guides it out the front of the fixture rather than wasting the light energy out the back, because it's useless there. And if you reflect it forward, you get more light output. At the front of all the fixtures, or many fixtures, not all, and I'm going to come onto that in a minute, inside these barn doors, which I'm going to take off so you can see the lens. At the front, we have a piece of glass. It's a curved piece of glass, and there are different kind of shapes that are on those glass depending on which fixture, which I'll go into in a bit. But the glass is there, and it's called the lens, and it basically focuses that light. So the reflector and the lamp give out a lot of light, and then that lens, basically using the curve, properly focuses it down into an area that is then usable and controllable for a lighting tech. There's nothing particularly exciting about a lens, but there it is. Now for the next couple of things, I'm going to have to go over to a profile, a different type of fixture, because I'm just going to talk about some things that are inherent only on certain types of fixtures. So on this particular fixture, we have what's called shutters. Now these are basically they are pieces of metal that literally slide into the side and cut out the light in a very precise way. So we can say, no, we don't want it to be a nice circle, which is the kind of standard output for this particular fixture. I don't want a circle of light. I want to shutter it in so I have a four-sided shape, or two-sided, or if you only put one shutter in, it's a one kind of weird wedge in it. But it basically means that we can cut it off, and it basically allows us to control the light output. And a little bit later, I'll show you what that actually looks like on the light output. Up next, we have the gate. Now, for profiles, which is this type of fixture, we are able to insert what are called gobos and other kind of scenic effects. This allows us to break the beam of light, exactly the same as a shutter would, except we can do it in a much more stylized way in terms of we can put images through that. So we can physically, we can put an image of a blind or the shadow of kind of leaves on the ground on the stage, and we do that using something that's called a gobo. I'm not going to go into gobos. I do touch on it quite a lot in the previous masterclass, which can be found on YouTube at the Barbican Theatre's site. So if you're really into gobos, I do touch on it a bit more, but not greatly because, again, it's a topic that's quite nerdy, and I didn't want to spend too much time on it in the last one either. But it goes in here and it slots in nicely, and it's just it's literally a gate. It's a little metal bar that just goes across that stops it from excluding all the light when we're not using a gobo. We don't want the light pouring out the top of the fixture. Exactly the same as a reflector. We want to angle and guide the light in the direction we want. The next thing is the power cable. Now, for all these fixtures that I'm showing you, they all run off of dimmable power, and we run it off a dimmer pack, which is what this thing is, and we can tell it how much power it has. Again, I go quite a lot into detail in the last masterclass in the difference between LED power and tungsten power, or generic fixture power. So I'd advise you go and have a look at that if you really want to get into detail on how the power works. But this is basically how the power gets in. So we plug this in, electricity travels down into the lamp, and causes the filament to burn or to glow at a certain temperature. As I said for the Fresnel there, we have lenses. Now in some fixtures, such as profiles, you have multiple lenses, and I'll touch on what the point of those lenses are in a minute. But for now, this tube is the lens tube, and it basically houses the lenses. And then there's a dial on the side in this particular fixture that can then we can then adjust the two lenses that are inside it, backwards and forwards, to adjust how the light comes out the front. And then last but not least, the important thing to mention is there is a bit at the front of most fixtures, including the Fresnels, that is the gel frame holder. Now on this particular one, it has 2 slots, and that is for, you can put 2 different gel frames in if you wanted to, 2 different gels, so we can affect the color of the light output and gels. Again, last masterclass we touched on how we pick colors and what those colors do in terms of how it changes the light output. So I'm not going to go into that right now, but at the front of the lamp, front of the fixture is the gel frame holder. So that's basically that's the kind of the main parts of a fixture. I'm just going to look up to Jamie and just check that I haven't forgotten any parts of a fixture that I should probably have mentioned. He's just shaking his head at me.
Yes, thank you for it.
Cool, lovely. We shall move on. Okay, I'm now going to just quickly run through kind of what all these different types of fixtures are and kind of what their uses are within a theatrical sense and how we use them differently. So up first, I'm going to start with the most basic form of fixture, and that is a floodlight. Now, the reason it's basic is because it actually has a lot less of the components that other fixtures have. So all those things I said, the gate, the lens tube, all of that, it doesn't have that because it is very, very simple. Basically, it has a lamp and it has a reflector, and that is it. So as you can see, it's got a lamp that runs across here, and this is a halogen bulb that's in here at the moment. And basically behind it, the shiny bit is the reflector. And that's basically all that makes up a flood. There's no control of where the light spreads. It just floods out everywhere that it can. And that's the whole point of them. They're designed to give out light output everywhere. The uses for this is, for example, on a cyclorama. So at the moment we're projecting on, so we can't, so we're not actually putting any color on. But you'll see quite often in dance and in some theatre, we will basically color a white background, a white sheet called the cyclorama, and we will use floods to light that in different colors. And that's why it's great for that, because it just floods everywhere. There's no kind of angling it except pointing it in the right direction. So you can just point it, but there's no like shutters or barn doors. There's no limiting of that light on them. They do have gel frame holders, and here is one of the gel frames for it. So it does have a holder on the front that it can put it in, so we can change the color, but we can't change where the light actually goes out. Yeah, so that is the flood. We use it quite a lot here. We've recently upgraded at the Barbican, relatively recently, although with a pandemic, I don't know what time is anymore. But recently-ish, we upgraded our tungsten fixtures, or halogen fixtures, to LEDs, which means that rather than having a single sheet, we have the almost the full spectrum of color to choose from. So it's a lot better, and it's also a lot better for power consumption. This particular fixture is a 650 watt lamp in it, which means that it basically requires 650 watts to power this thing at full brightness, which is quite a lot. When you then consider an LED, it's somewhere in the region of 100. So we limit the power outage, which then helps environmentally, and also our bills. It reduces that quite significantly. Up next, we have Fresnels. Now, I showed you a big one earlier, and this is a slightly smaller one. This is a silicon Fresnel, and it's a bit smaller. It's a bit not quite as powerful. Again, this is a 650 watt version. Not that that'll mean a lot to most people, but it's still a fairly good fixture, and it's fairly punchy, and it has all the things that we mentioned before. So it has the clamp, it has the yoke, it does have a lens on the front. It has a safety chain. This particular one has one built in, which is extra helpful, because then you can't lose it. It doesn't have a gate because it's not a profile. This one, basically, this fixture is used to create soft-edged pools and kind of soft circles of light. It's particularly good for kind of top light. Currently in the rig that's lighting me, there is, actually, no, I think there are PCs up in the rig, but we'll get onto that in a sec. So the size of the beam can be adjusted by moving the, so you've got the lens and you've got the lamp and the reflector. Basically what happens is that as you move the lamp closer to this lens, the beam output gets bigger. And as you move it further back, it then narrows the light output. So that's how we can adjust how big or small it is. And then we can use, on top of that, we can use barn doors, which are just metal, similar to the shutters. They're just metal that basically allows us to kind of cut off where the light hits. So we don't blind the audience. We don't light something on stage that we don't want lit, which is very important. Fresnels have, the lens of a Fresnel basically has circles on the front, which I'm going to take off. Might come a bit closer. I don't know whether you can see through this. Can you see that a bit better? Is that? So as you can see, there are rings. This basically allows it to kind of soften the light output and basically redirects it effectively. And the reason that's important will become apparent in a sec when I start talking about PCs. So that lens is curved, like most lenses, and it helps us to control the light output. I'll put that together later. So moving on to PCs. Now, PCs are very similar to Fresnels in most senses. They are almost identical. They also have all the parts that you would expect. So it has safety chain, it has clamps, it has yoke, it has a lens. And the lens is the important thing here because that's what kind of differs it from a Fresnel. So PC lenses or plano-convex lens or pebble convex lens or what's the other one? Prism convex lenses. They all mean the same thing. We call them PCs because we can't be bothered to say the full length. They have a slightly different pattern on the front. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this through this. I will. So the lens on here doesn't have circles. It actually has a pebble effect. It kind of, rather than the rings, it has kind of a dotted pebbly effect on its lens. Now the reason for that is it helps to dissipate the hot spot in the center of that can sometimes be created, and so it's actually a slightly harder edged circle than Fresnel gives out. So it's not hard-edged by any stretch. It's still very soft. But if you put them side by side, they are just one's slightly harder edged than the other, which I may show you in a bit. What's next? Profiles. So we touched a bit on profiles and kind of how they differ. I'm actually going to turn this one on so that you can see kind of the adjustment that you can do with profiles and why they're potentially the most versatile fixtures we have. Just backtracking slightly, the use for PCs, they can be used for lots of things. So you can use them for face light. Lots of people use profiles for face light, but PCs and Fresnels can also be used. They're very good at marking out areas and pools and kind of setting boundaries in light for action in terms of the performance. Back to profiles. So I'm actually going to turn this one on so that you can see kind of what we can do with the light. Now, Jamie, can they see the backdrop well enough? Quite well? I'm actually not going to do this one. I'm going to use a slightly narrower one. I'm just going to light it down. If there are any technicians watching, I'm sorry for lying this down. Sorry. But we don't have any. I didn't set up any sort of framing. So this fixture, we can actually create a very nice circle of light that allows us, it's very precise. As you can see, it's quite, this particular one at the moment has quite a hard edge to it, which allows us to kind of really, like for spotlights and things like that, but also for, they're very useful when we start introducing the shutters. They're very useful for things like corridors of light, which is predominant in dance, but quite a lot of theatre uses it as well. And it also gives us really good control. So I'm just going to quickly show you what happens when we start bringing in the shutters. As you can see, I can bring them in quite far. I can actually bring them in almost the whole way, but you start to see the outer edge. So we can go to very thin, very small outputs of light in terms of thin corridors, and then we can also then bring it in from the other sides as well to make it into really small squares, or we can have big squares, and I'll show you that in a second. So as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple lenses within this particular one. That's because we have a zoom lens, so we can change the size of the light that's outputted by moving those lenses further and closer and further apart. So I'm just going to quickly show you what happens when we start moving them. So I can make this I can make the beam a bit bigger, and that's how we move one of the lenses. And then the second lens then shifts focus. So currently, as you can see, it's quite washed out, quite a soft edge, and I can basically bring it in to being a much harder edged spot. And then when we start bringing the shutters, then you can see that it actually we can do much bigger shapes because the beam was bigger. It doesn't have to be hard edged when we do shutters. The shutters work regardless, and we can then, and quite often we do, we focus it with a hard edge so we can get the lines about right, and then we just soften it so that it's not quite as obvious where the marks are. And then we can then adjust afterwards again just to bring it back in. So I said that the reason I put the other one down and got this one up is because it's a narrower focus. So you can choose how wide the output of light goes. So this is done in degrees. So this particular fixture is a 15 to 30 degree lens. It means that we can have the light output coming out the front at 15 degrees all the way out to 30, which is quite a narrow beam. You can get much narrower, of course, but for the Barbican, this is a really good kind of middle ground where it's thin enough, it's narrow enough for us to use in the ways we want. The other fixture that I had up on the desk originally is a 25 to 50 range. Degree range. So we can go from 25 degrees all the way out to 50 degrees angle, which means that from out front of house, we can light basically just over half the stage with a single fixture if we wanted to. Quite often we don't, but we could if that was necessary. So that is a profile. Anything I need to... no, that's everything from this. So moving on to the next type of fixture, one of the last ones to talk about is parkans. Now parkans are very similar to floods in that they are very simple. There's not much adjustment to be done. There is a little bit more, but there's not a huge amount more. Unfortunately, I don't have a traditional parkan with me today because we've recently, we've swapped over to slightly better parkans from ETC. But this is a parkan. It looks a little bit different to ones that you might see if you type in parkan online. But they work in the exact same way. So they have the clamp, they have the yoke, they have a reflector inside, and they have a lamp, and they have a lens. Now, the thing that makes parkans very special is the original parkans, the lamp, reflector, and lens were all packaged together in a sealed kind of lamp. So you bought the lamp that already had the lens on, already had the lamp in, already had the reflector, which made parkans very cheap because the actual outer metal didn't cost a lot to manufacture and make. And so the actual time you spent the money was when you blew a lamp and you had to buy a new lamp. The ETC have taken a slightly different model, and they've gone for much more traditional, or not traditional. They've gone to line themselves up with all their other kind of fixtures. They have a removable lens, and it has a removable lamp, and it has its own reflector inside. So they've kind of streamlined it with all their other fixtures, so that everything is pretty much interchangeable across ETC, across their generic range. So the thing that makes this a bit different, so similar to the Flood, it has a kind of a flat cylindrical beam that comes out. This obviously sprays it everywhere thanks to the reflector, but this one, depending on the lens that you have on, basically doesn't disperse the light quite as much as reflector. It's still very wide and still as uncontrolled, but I don't know if you can see. Are you able to see if I start rotating it? This actually has a slight straight top and straight bottom at the moment, and then as I rotate it, it goes, you can see the shape moving pretty well. So this is obviously a great advantage, and the rock era of the 50s, 60s.
80s.
Pardon?
80s.
80s. I wasn't born, I don't mind. The rock era basically loved them. So quite often when you see 80s rock bands, you'll see lots of kind of really punchy, powerful colors coming from behind them. And that will, 9 times out of 10, be parkans that are doing that, because they're cheap, but they're also really, really bright. So they're very powerful, and they similar to a Flood, they flood the stage with quite a lot of light, but it's more controlled. So it's powerful but controlled. And that was very appealing to people who were doing rock designing in the 80s. The downside is that they run very, very warm. Lots of these fixtures do run quite hot and will burn you if they've been on for a long time and you go and touch it, it will hurt. So just as a kind of safety thing, if it's been on for a while, don't go up and just touch it unless you have gloves on, because they get very, very warm to the touch. And again, that is a very useful difference between them and LEDs. LED fixtures don't get hot. They don't tend to heat up as much, and they're much colder, and you can go and touch them even after they've been on for hours on end. So in terms of a safety front, that's also very useful, LED. Cool, that is parkans, and like I said, very simple fixtures. And then the last fixture I'm going to talk about on here is the Birdie. Now the Birdie, by comparison, is a very small light, a very small fixture, and it is very similar to a parkan. It is effectively a miniature parkan. So it has, and this is a much more traditional shape of a parkan, but parkans are much bigger. Again, it has all the things you'd expect, although I've taken the clamp off, but I've still got the nut and bolt for the clamp. So the clamp still fits on the top, still got its yoke, still got its lamp holder, still has a lamp inside, but very similar to the original parkans. It has its own lamp with reflector that is kind of it's all encased in a single unit. So inside there, it has the lamp is in the inside, plus the reflector, and this does have a slight curve to the front of its, I think, has a front to its lens, but it is all included in that, and it kind of disperses the light evenly. Now these are very small and not as powerful as these other fixtures by anywhere near, but they're really very good for along the floor as kind of footlights or floor lights that kind of light up. Again, similar to PARs, they don't have much in the way of control as to where the beam goes other than pointing and shooting. And you can't, most lamps that you put in these don't have quite the same rotational benefit to them. They just kind of give out light, very similar to the Flood. The difference is that thanks to this kind of long tube, again, it's not quite a lens tube, but the tube, it kind of funnels the light in a slightly more controlled way than a Flood. So that is a Birdie. Anything else? No. So as I said, this is all these fixtures are generic versions. So we give it power, and depending on how much power we give it, the lamp inside glows at a different brightness, all the way up to our biggest ones are 750 watts at the moment. And our lowest that I've shown you would probably be the Birdie, which is at 15 watt. Yeah, about 15 watts. So these ones are tiny, and they kind of use up the same power as an LED, but nowhere near the brightness of an LED. So that is the thing. So in more modern times, we've kind of shifted over towards LED, and you'll know that through kind of LED lights have come into day-to-day domestic use, and they're very good for conserving energy while also doing this almost the same job as tungsten fixtures that we have here. They're also more expensive at the moment, but yeah. Cool. So I'm now going to shift over to kind of, now you know the types of fixtures, I'm going to shift us over to kind of what we use those fixtures to do. And so the start of that is to kind of show you how we use lighting plans and kind of show you how we read lighting plans and kind of how they work. So Jamie, if we just swap over to my laptop. So on your screen, I think now, is up. On your screen, this is just a very simple lighting plot. So there's nothing particularly crazy complicated about this. I know for someone who doesn't look at lighting plots all the time, lots of information looks as if it's very complicated. And I'm going to quickly talk you through kind of what it is. But just as a contrast, so this is a light plot of the Barbican Theatre as we are. So basically it has a bird's eye view of what the lighting rig is. So under here is the audience, and then this is the main stage. So I am about here on the main stage, just in front of these fixtures, which are lighting me. This is, although it looks complicated, this actually has a lot of information missing, and that's because I'm not going to go into all the things that a lighting plot can have on it. But there are, again, similar to these fixtures, there are kind of a criteria of things that most lighting plots will have. But just to show you, so you can have much more complicated lighting plots. This is for M Butterfly, and this is in a completely different theatre, of course, and you can tell by the seating, and it has a lot more bars than we have. You can have hand-drawn, really simplistic lighting plots, which can be useful, but it depends on what the use for it is, which I'll go through in a minute. And then this is the lighting plot for Hamilton. This is just the moving lights. This isn't any of the generics. This is just the moving light plot. So they have quite a lot more fixtures in their rigs for the West End shows. This is, I believe, this is the one on Broadway. But yeah, it has all the features that in a second I'm going to go through, and I'll refer back to it in a bit, so you can see that they kind of all have the main ingredients that you need. So we'll go back to my one, and I just threw this together. This isn't actually what's up in the rig at the moment, but I thought I'd run it. So the first thing that all lighting plots will have is a layout of the bars and booms in the theatre that you're designing the lights for. So here we have 4 main bars over stage with a supplementary bar, and then we have some bars that run up and down stage, and then we have 2 bars that are out front of house over the audience. It's quite a standard setup for a kind of a small theatre, because yeah, 3 to 4 bars over stage is very useful, and then 1 or 2 bars out front of house just for the face light is pretty standard. The second thing that all lighting plans will have is, of course, fixtures. So there's lots of different types of so all the different types of fixtures are currently on this plan as I scroll up, and I will point those out, assuming my battery doesn't die in a second. And so all of these different symbols mean different fixtures that I have just shown you. Now, you're not expected to know what all these fixtures are off the top of your head, and so almost all plots will also have a key. Now, that key will tell you the symbol that was used for a particular type of light or fixture, and kind of then you can look on the plan and go, oh, what is that fixture? Look at it, look at the key and go, oh yeah, it's a source 4 Fresnel. The key is also very useful because some fixtures look very similar. For example, here we have, in this cluster of 3, there are actually 2 different fixtures, which when I zoom in like that, it's quite obvious to see that they're slightly different. But when you're looking at a full plan, they look very similar. So it's very important that you look carefully at what fixture is actually required to go up where. And again, you look at the key, and you can see that the 2550 has two lines on it, and so I need 2 of those out front. When this one only has 1, so I go and look at the plan, and that's a narrow 1530. The other thing that quite often, well, most of them will have is gel kind of numbers on them, so you know what color gel. So all gels, which is how you change the color of the light output, all gels have their own unique number depending on the manufacturer. So there are several manufacturers, and I personally use Lee filters, which is why there's an L on the front of this. So it's Lee filter 201, which is a full CT color temperature change. So we know what those mean, and if you go to Lee filter and you type in 201, then you will be able to buy that particular gel, and it will always be that color, and it will work exactly the same, which is very useful for when you're ordering gels for tours or for shows that are going out and you need to replace the gels often. Then you need to know what number you're using. The other thing that almost all lighting plots will have is patch numbers. Now these are basically we number the fixtures. They have their own unique number, so that when we are in the room doing focusing, or when we're doing actual plotting of the lights, or if we're mid-show and we need to adjust something, we can look on our plan and go, oh, that particular fixture is way too bright, let's bring it down. What number is it? Oh, look, it's channel 8. And then on the lighting desk, we can find channel 8 and adjust it, and we know it will be adjusting the correct fixture. And that's very important across lighting plans. So if I just jump back down to Hamilton, as you can see, it has almost everything that I say. Down in the bottom right here, it has the key, which just tells us what all the fixtures are. It has the lighting bars. It has all numbers. The reason there's not gel numbers on this particular one is because these are moving heads, and almost all of them, I believe, have color wheels in them, so you can adjust the color. In the same way, LEDs don't tend to have color filters on them because they're usually LED and color changing, so you don't necessarily need to. LED doesn't mean color changing. You can have color changing LEDs and non-color changing LEDs, and the non-changing ones, of course, will need gels, but that's, again, all decided by the lighting designer. Anything else I want to do? So just the last thing, on our lighting plan, we also have booms. Now, they're not set up in the space at the moment, but these are basically just towers of fixtures that we can have at the side of stage to give floor side light. That's really useful, especially in dance. We use kind of floor fixtures quite a lot in dance, and it just depends on how you want to use the lights. So for dance, we use the front floors, such as birdies, and we also use booms quite a lot rather than the face light, and that's just because there's a slight different focus on what needs to be lit in a dance performance versus what needs to be lit in theatre. In theatre, you want to be able to see their faces, and you want to see all the expressions and be able to see their mouth move, so you can articulate what they're saying, so you can understand what they're trying to articulate that they're saying. Whereas in dance and movement-based theatre, you don't need to see their face quite as much often. Often you're looking at the shapes of their body is making, and you're quite often looking for the shadows that are created by an absence of light rather than this nice washed out, I can see everything. I personally find it really interesting when designers mix and match styles. So you've got a pretty standard theatre show where you do need lots of face light, and then there are certain sequences or certain moments where the audience is treated to having kind of less light, but it creates certain effects on stage, which I find really interesting. Okay, so I'm now gonna, we can go over to the other camera, and I'm just gonna show you, the last thing I'm going to show you today is how we actually rig one of these fixtures. So I'm going to rig up, I'll rig up a profile. So I'll take this over. So as I said, I assume we're over at this camera now. As I said, I've just set up a kind of a mock bar. Obviously, this isn't here most of the time, but I didn't particularly fancy going up a ladder with a camera to show you how to rig up a ladder. So what I'm going to teach you is the same principle at ground level as it is up in the rig, but it's just easier for me to show you down here. So first things first, the first check you need to do is make sure that the clamp is tight and actually attached to the top of the fixture. The worst thing to do is for you about to go up a ladder, you put it on the bar, and then you realize you haven't actually tightened this, and the whole fixture falls down, which is not ideal. And because you haven't got a safety chain on yet, you will drop that fixture, and it will, 9 times out of 10, it will break. There are delicate parts in it, such as the lamp, which is made of glass, and obviously you don't want to ruin anything. So that's the first thing. You do a bit of a safety check first, just to make sure that everything seems to be in order, everything is connected, everything is as it should be, and not hindering you in a safety perspective. Up next, you quite literally, I'm going to put it on this way just so you can see the next bit. You put it up onto the bar. Now this in itself is not very safe because we haven't tightened it, so it can move, it could fall off, and it's just kind of not safe yet. So you'll follow the lighting plan, and you'll know where to put it on the bar thanks to the lighting plan. So you'll know, cool, it's going to go about there on the bar, and then what you do is you tighten it. You keep tightening until it becomes quite difficult to move. And that is now on that bar. So as you can see from the fact that this is now wobbling, when I move it, the fixture isn't moving off the bar, that is actually the actual bar moving there, which up in the rig, that doesn't do. The next step is always, as soon as you've put this on, the next step is to put that safety up. That's because as you start adjusting the fixture, if that decides to break, people below you are still in danger. So as soon as you put it on the bar and tightened it, the next thing to do is to wrap this over the bar and clip it on. And then you tighten up the carabiner. So now if it fell, the safety chain would, don't worry, Jamie, I won't drop it. The safety chain will support the entire weight of that. And this chain is rated per fixture in order to take not just the weight of the fixture, but the dynamic weight as it falls. So it's rated very highly. I think this one's probably a ton, just to make sure that there is as little chance as possible of this fixture falling to the ground and injuring anyone, because that is not ideal. Now then, the next step, the next couple of steps don't matter which order, but I do them in a certain order, so I'm going to show you that. So the next step I do is I actually point the fixture in the rough direction that it's meant to be pointing according to the lighting plan. Again, on the lighting plan, the designer will probably put it kind of angled at a certain way so you know which way it's facing, just to make sure that you know roughly where it's going to go. Obviously, later down the line, you'll have to focus it properly when we start adjusting all the parts, but that'll be done with the lighting designer in the room. Once you have it at an angle, at the kind of the angle you want, it's then a lot easier for you to judge how much slack you need in this cable. Now, the plug might be over here, and lots of people, the first thing they do is just go, okay, cool. The issue with this is that this is a bit of a hazard in itself, and also it restricts, especially if it's too tight, it then restricts your movement of the fixture. If it is this far, you can get extension cables that will be able to extend it down the bar. So the first thing I do is I take this, I have a little bit of a loop, so just to make sure that it's loose and it can move quite freely. And then I get some LX tape, and you just wrap it around the bar, like so. That now secures that in that position, but there is enough slack on this that you do have almost full range of movement on this. Obviously, you know roughly where it's going to go, so you don't need You don't need huge amounts of slack on it, but it's always good to have a bit just in case things change or the focus changes slightly. As I said, this would then go into either a circuit on the bar, which most of this will have IWBs, internally wired bars, which basically have plugs on the bar, which you can just plug into. But like I said, if the plug is too far away or the socket is too far away, then you then need to use an extension. And again, as you go along the bar, you stop the cable from drooping by just adding more tape, and then obviously that will plug into an extension. And then again, the extension gets taped all the way along the bar at fairly regular intervals, just to make sure that it doesn't sag too much off the bar. Once everything is plugged in, the next thing is just to make sure that the fixture is ready for light output. Now, it doesn't matter about how focused it is, how the lenses sit, but the most important thing, especially on a profile, is to make sure that you bring out all the shutters to their full position. As I showed you earlier, you can shutter off all the light if you needed to. So if the shutters are all the way in, when you try and test all your lights, you'll get no light output from this fixture, and you'll be confused as to why it's doing that. Nothing wrong with the fixture, the shutters are just in. So it's good practice to open up those shutters. Now then, the next thing is depending on how you're doing it, but the next thing would then be to put the gels in. We usually do this just before we focus, rather than as we're rigging, but some people like to put it in there and then so they have all the gels in. So that's how you rig a profile. I'm just going to go grab a, you can leave the camera here. I'm just going to grab a Fresnel just to show you the differences, because there are a few, namely because of the barn doors and everything like that. So I'm just going to... So again, the method, no matter what the fixture, is exactly the same. The order is the same, and everything we do is pretty much the same. So the first things first, we just check the fixture, we make sure that it's tight, we make sure that it's not going to fall apart as we pick it up, and it's not, thankfully. So the next thing we do is we put it on the bar. Now, the reason I'm showing you a second fixture is because it's very important, this cable. In terms of safety, you do not want to put another fixture on top of another one's cable. This is because it can damage the cable, and also it puts the cable under a lot of strain that it doesn't need to be under. So we always rig under, which is why we make sure these are at a fairly good interval. So there's a little bit of slack so that we can lift up so that we can put other fixtures on. Again, in the exact same way, once we've checked the lighting plan, we know where it's going to go. Just there. Next step is always the safety chain. Safety chain is next. And again, we make sure that this goes under the cable, not on top of it. Because again, if it has to act, as in we drop the cable, we really do not want this accidentally slicing that cable because it's quite thin. We don't want it to slice the cable and then make this whole bar live, potentially. So we're trying to avoid as many catastrophes as possible. And so we go under the fixture's cable. Again, put it in, close the carabiner so that it is secure. Up next, again, point it in the general direction. I'm going to go that way this time. And again, we leave a good amount of slack, and then we get our tape. We wrap it around the bar just to secure it in place, so that, again, I've got good full range of movement, and then we can go and find this. We can take this off to its, out to its plug. Again, so now we're quite happy with that. Again, we need to make sure the fixture is ready to light output. Similar to shutters, the barn doors on the front of this can block basically all the light. So our aim is to make sure that it's easy for us to identify later that the fixture is working, but we open it up so it is ready to be adjusted later down the line. And again, this all goes off into the plugs. I'm just going to check my notes to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Jamie, anything from you? Yeah, so the only thing left to say on rigging is that the last thing you do before you go down the ladder again is you just do a last kind of visual check to make sure that you've remembered to do everything. So you quickly run through and go, clamp secure, safety chain's okay, point in the right direction, shutters are out, barn doors are open, it's plugged in, we're ready to go. Because that will save a lot of troubleshooting later.
I'm muted. You talk about the process of checking that the lights are getting power.
Yes. So, as in troubleshooting that the lights have because they're not on, or just checking that they actually are getting power.
Channel checking.
Yes. So once we've put these into the dimmers and they should be working, and we can go into soft patch and hard patch another time. But once we know that they should be getting power, the next thing we do is on the lighting desk, we do what's called a channel check. And this basically, we run through the numbers that were on the lighting plan, and we start at 1, or the earliest number, because it might not start at 1. We start off at the earliest number, and we basically, one by one, we turn these channels on and give them power. And what we do is we just check that, first of all, the light that we're expecting to turn on turns on, because sometimes you can get the channels the wrong way around, and then you have to make sure you have that right. But once you're sure that it should be on, check that it is. And sometimes it's not on, and there's a number of things that could be wrong with either our patching or the cables that we've used or the fixture that means that it's not turning on. So the general rule about all things tech is you start with the simplest solution and the easiest to check and fix. So the first thing I often do is I then go into the lighting desk's patch and just double check that I've patched the right number to the right plug that we've plugged it into. Because quite often, if you're doing that very fast, you slip up, you accidentally click 2 numbers at once, and the desk saves it as, rather than channel 32, like 327 or something, because you accidentally touched a random number. If that's right and it's still not coming on, then we check at dimmer level and make sure that the dimmers are working and make sure that the dimmers are plugged into the right things. If that's still not working, we can then come up to the bar with a power pen. So the next thing is to check that the all the way up to plug, so from this side, is actually all working. So we have a power pen that basically you put it into the socket, into the live terminal, the live socket of the plug, and it lights up. It doesn't zap you, it just lights up because it's made of plastic. So it lights up and just tells you, oh yeah, power is getting to here. So if power is getting up onto the bar, we know there's something wrong with the actual fixture. So the first thing you do is you check that the plug hasn't come out and that it's looking sturdy. That's 9 times out of 10, that's not an issue, but it's something worth checking. You come around and if it's going all the way to here, which if the plug looks healthy, it should be, the chances are it is the lamp inside. So what you do is you turn it off at the desk, you unplug it to make sure that you're not getting any electricity coming through when you're fiddling around with the insides, because you do not want that. And basically what you do is you open it up, as I showed you earlier, and you take the old lamp out, or you look at the lamp first of all, because usually it's turned black if it's blown, or the wire is no longer connected inside it. So you can usually see if there's something wrong with the lamp. And if there's something quite obvious, then what you do is you go and get a new lamp, you put on gloves or you use tissue so you don't touch the lamp, as I said earlier. You put it back in, plug it back in, test it, turn it on slowly to make sure you don't blow the lamp again. And then usually that fixes it. 9 times out of 10, it's a blown lamp is quite often what has gone wrong. Because lamps blow quite often if there's temperature change, if they've not been used for a while, if they get too old. There's lots of reasons why a lamp blows. And so we quite often find ourselves, if something's wrong with a fixture, after we've checked the stuff at desk level, 9 times out of 10, we go up and check to see if it's the fixture. And then at very worst case scenario, if you've checked everything and everything should be working, but it's not, then it could be internal wiring of the actual fixture, at which point we usually drop the fixture out, not drop it, but we take it out of the rig in the exact same way that we put it in, but in reverse order. So you take out you close the barn doors, you take out you undo all of your taping, you then unclip the safety chain while holding the fixture. You then undo the clamp, you take it down, and we put a new fixture up that hopefully will work. And then at a later date, when we're not in the rush of show or in the rush of trying to rig before a show, we will then take time in kind of maintenance time to try and figure out what's actually wrong with it. For more complicated fixes, we send it off to the manufacturer and they do the fixing for us. That's usually more for LED fixtures than it is for the quite simplistic kind of electronics within fixtures like this. That's everything from me in terms of, so that's everything I was planning on talking about today. Do we have any questions?
We don't actually have any questions put in.
Lovely.
So I'd like to encourage anyone who's watching just to
please,
put in anything, even if you think it's a really stupid question, just fire it off.
And even if as long as it's technical related, if it's kind of tangibly connected to what I've been talking about, that's fine as well. So as long as it's tech related, please do put a question in so that we can discuss it. And it might seem like a silly question, but chances are other people might be thinking it as well.
I can ask you a question then.
Yeah.
So rigging for a normal kind of regular show Marjons or Barbican, how long does it take?
So it depends on the scale of the show and what is already in the rig already. The general rule is for a standard size rig, we leave 2 full working days to get it rigged and working and then focused. So usually it's a 2-day job, 2 8-hour days. It's not a quick job by any stretch. And especially when we get down to focusing level, that can, depending on how exact you need it, that can be a painstaking process of getting it perfect. For example, in the rig, we've got what are the pipe ends. Pipe ends are basically just lights that are at the end of pipes. So they're the side lights, basically, top side. And they are my least favorite thing to focus because not only do you need to get one correct, but then there's one on the other side that needs to match it so that if you ever need to put just those fixtures up, they are perfect with each other. And that can take a lot of time. Another thing that takes a long time is things like corridors of light. And that's because even though I showed you that one fixture can do that rectangle, in terms of where the light needs to come from, it's multiple fixtures. We never do a corridor with a single fixture, and that's just because you get lit quite oddly. So it's usually 3 or 4 fixtures that all need to be perfectly lined up in terms of their focus and all look the same so that the audience doesn't notice it's multiple fixtures, but it needs to be in order to work effectively.
Excellent, thank you. We do have a question just coming through from James. How do you work within power limitations but still make it look nice? So,
building to building is very different in terms of how much power we're allowed to draw. So for example, the rig at the Barbican here has a 100 amp 3-phase, is it? Yeah, 100 amp 3-phase that comes into the building, which means that we have three sets of 100 amp that we can draw on in order to create these lights. So it's quite tricky at times. Quite often we're usually helped by the fact that a lot of theatre architects, when they created the theatre, they don't put an excessive amount of plugs in here that if you say, for example, just half of them, it would blow. That would be ridiculous. So a lot of some of the work is done prior, but here's something we have to think about. So each of the dimmer packs, Jay, can we just jump over to the other camera a sec? So this particular dimmer pack, now I jumped it down to a much smaller input of how much power can come in, but dimmer packs, for example, this 088 beta pack, we have it running off a 32 amp, and that's what this socket is. So the standard plug in your home is a 13 amp, and this is 32 amps, which can give a lot more power. We're allowed to put through this particular plug, we're allowed to put 7.8 kilowatts. No, 7.2 kilowatts. Yeah, don't put too much through. Now, usually that's not too much because there's only 6 channels on this. So for example, you've got a 1 kilowatt a 1K Fresnel, and you put one in each, you're only going to use up 6 kilowatts if they're all at full at the same time. The difference is that these particular packs, you can put 2 in each socket, into each circuit, which means that if you filled them all up with 1Ks, that's 12 kilowatts. So at the planning stage, when the lighting designer is designing it, they will take that into account and make sure they don't use too many fixtures that would blow the whole thing way out. You'd be way off the power loading. But also when we start rigging, when we get to patching and we start plugging into these packs, we are very cautious about which ones we put into which packs. For example, we have, at front of house, we have, currently lighting me, we have 6 of these 750 watt profiles. Now those could actually all fit into a single dimmer pack, but if they were all being paired, we probably wouldn't put them all into the same dimmer pack, just because if you pair the 3 sets of 2 to get the 6, then when you then put in the next 3, so you've got 6 fixtures, then another 3, say for example you put in 3 1Ks, you're getting dangerous, you're getting close to that limit, if not exceeding that limit. So we put a lot of thought into where we plug into, but we know how many watts each of the fixtures are, and we know obviously how much power we can draw from a single dimmer pack, and so from there we can make sure that we don't draw too much from a single thing. We often, 9 times out of 10, we can quite happily accommodate for that. If all the fixtures were at full, then we wouldn't blow it. Sometimes we get very close to that limit. We try not to, but especially if, say for example, I know the show and I know that those fixtures never go above 20%, we're only using 20% of the power, so we never get anywhere near that limit. The reason we still try and not go over that limit ever is because if someone slips on the lighting desk and they accidentally put all the fixtures to full, suddenly we're drawing all the power, and suddenly you are drawing all 7.2 kilowatts, if not more, and you will blow the circuit breaker. Luckily, in most theatres, the dimmers are on their own RCDs and MCBs. Yeah. They have their own trip switches, which means that we don't need to worry too much about it over, because as soon as it starts drawing too much power, the panel basically shuts it down and goes, no, you're not drawing that much power, before it can damage anything. But obviously mid-show, you don't want those tripping, because then that ruins the show, because they'll all turn off. So yeah, we have to be very careful, and we are.
Excellent. I think that was it's often a difficult thing that we have to deal with at the Barbican Theatre, because there's power limitations here. We were able to plug in many more lights than actually we can power in the rig. Mm-hmm. So it's always something that has to be considered. Another question from an attendee. So if you have an LED fixture in the rig, it's not working, what do you do about troubleshooting why that might not be working?
Cool. So in the exact same way as a generic fixture, we start at the easiest thing that it could be, as in easiest for us to check. So even an LED fixture still has its own address and its own channel number that we know should link up to a certain DMX address. DMX, again, is the way that, I just touched on that, is the way that we transmit data around to all the fixtures and between all the dimmer packs. There is other forms of data, such as ArtNet, but we, here at the Barbican and at Marjon, we don't use that. We use DMX just because that's just the install that we had. An LED in the exact same way, we'll start at the desk and we'll make sure that we have the numbers correct. And we make sure that the number matches what it should be on our plan, and also what it should be in terms of its DMX address. If that is correct, exactly the same as the generic fixtures, we will go up to the fixture and we will check that the cabling is okay and we've plugged it in. Quite often, we have what we call an air gap, and that is when we've something's come unplugged or we forgot to plug something in, and there's a gap where obviously the data can't get through, the electricity can't get through because there's air. If we still haven't found the problem, even with checking all the cabling, we'll go up to the fixture and check that so on the back of LED fixtures, you can tell it what address it should be at. So there's another level of kind of assigning it a number. So we make sure that that's right and that matches what we had on our plan, what we have in our desk. If you still haven't found the issue and it's not turning on, for example, You, again, can swap out the cable itself, so the power cable. It could be dodgy power cable, so you might want to attempt swapping that out just to make sure that it isn't a fault with the cable. But if you've done everything and you put up a cable that you know should be working and it's still not turning on, it will be something internally within the LED, at which point it exactly the same as when you work out it's an internal fault within a fixture. You take it down, replace it with something else, with another fixture if you have one, or find a workaround if you don't, as in finding a fixture that's similar, can do the same job, maybe not quite as well, but you need to. That's quite a think on your feet moment where you have to kind of work out, okay, so I don't have this LED. Can I do it with a generic fixture? Can I do it with a different LED? How do I fix this? And then if it's a simple fix, which LED tends not to be quite so simple, then you could fix it in-house again in a maintenance kind of slot, or you send it off to its manufacturer or to a repair shop to figure out what was wrong with it, repair it, and send it back to you. Obviously, that costs money, whereas if you can do it in-house, that's better because it's only your own time rather than having to pay someone else to look at it. But sometimes it's something that a part needs replacing, the motherboard needs replacing, for example, in an LED, the LED engine itself could be faulty, and it's something that needs to be swapped out and you need to order the parts for. Again, you can do that in-house, and there are lots of theatres that do it in-house, but there's a certain skill set that I personally don't have. Anything particularly, if it's particularly complicated, I can do basic electronics, but if it's too complicated, I would rather send it off than me messing it up more. So quite often we send it off.
Great, thank you, Nathan. Basic question about safety chains, safety wires. What's the best way to use a safety chain? Is it through the yoke, or is there a better way of using it?
So there's not a particularly good way. Most of the time, fixtures have a little catch on them. So this one is quite obvious to see. And this is a designated point, and it's basically the manufacturer's designated that as a strong point. So that is a really strong place that shouldn't fall apart from the main body. Not all fixtures have a designated point to put them on. Lots of them do. I'm trying to find one that doesn't. No, I don't think this one does. So this particular this is a quartet, and as far as I'm aware, and I'm sure later down the line someone might come up to me and tell me that there is one and I've missed it. But this one I don't think has an actual point like this, at which point the next best place is the yoke. Don't put it over the clamp, because if the clamp fails, that's the issue. It's very unlikely that the yoke will entirely fail. One side might fail, as in the nut or the bolt inside one side might fail, but it's very unlikely that both sides will fail. Again, the point of a safety chain is to, as best as we possibly can, minimize the risk of it dropping. Nothing is 100%, and so it may be that by some freak accident, the clamp fails and the safety chain fails. It's very unlikely, and through our yearly test or our regular pat testing and our regular, as we do our checks before we even rig them, we notice if a safety chain is wearing thin or it looks damaged, and we'll swap it out to make sure that it doesn't happen. But no system is 100%. The point isn't to make it foolproof or to make it 100% proof. It's just to give us that extra layer of protection so that if the worst were to happen, the chances are we have the backup will work. So there isn't a particularly strong point. Some fixtures have a strong point, but the next best place would be the yoke. And that's just because it's unlikely to fail in two places, and so it makes it a bit safer than other parts of the fixture. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting it anywhere else in a fixture. I would probably stick to a designated point or a yoke, because other parts, although might seem strong, could be made of just plastic and could break off very easily, and therefore defeats the whole point of having the safety chain if a bit too much pressure causes it to break.
Awesome, thank you. This will probably be our final question for the evening. I'd like to thank everyone for asking questions. And also just to remind people, at the very end of this webinar, there'll be a slide showing up on screen where if you have enjoyed watching and you would like to help the Barbican Theatre by donating some money to help us support the work that we do for young people and training, there's a QR code on the screen, and there's also a link, I believe, in the description of YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, where you can help support us. So we'll be much appreciating that. So the final question is, can you tell us a little bit about the most enjoyable experience you've had whilst working in lighting? Was it something really challenging, and how did you overcome the challenge?
Most enjoyable. I really love, it's not a specific moment, it's a series of moments, and they happen very rarely, and I do love it when they happen. So as a designer, you can plan and you can prep and you can know what in your head what lights are going to do and what the light beam will look like and what shadows will get cast. But I love the odd moments you get where a happy accident happens, where you're just putting up some random colors and you're just creating color palettes, and you somehow get a set of colors that you didn't think would work or that shouldn't work by the standard kind of confines of how color wheels work and how color palettes work. But somehow you look at it and go, that is exactly, not necessarily for the moment that you were programming for there, but that is exactly what I need for later, or that is exactly the happy accident I've just come across this great color combination, or a beautiful shadow comes through the set that you weren't expecting, because especially when you're on tour, so obviously I rig at Marjon for a 6-meter rig, and then I have to change the lighting plan slightly for when we come to a 5.5 meter because the angles are slightly different, and then if we go to a 3-meter rig, it's very different. So sometimes, especially when touring, just happy accidents come through where something looks beautiful that you don't plan. And of course, if anyone asks, you planned it. But in the moment, you're not planning it. And sometimes some beautiful things come through, and some beautiful colors come through. And it's why my favorite lighting color is this turquoise that I didn't even know existed until I was doing a show, and when I was buying gels, I think I mistyped a gel number, and I was meant to be getting a color near that, but it was meant to be a bit bluer, and there was this beautiful turquoise that turned up. I was like, it's the wrong color. Put it in the rig, and it turned out to be one of the best colors that I've used, and I have since then used it quite a lot because I happened to come across it by accident. And yeah, I did also then order the correct gel and use it for that piece because I didn't need that turquoise, but I found that color thanks to an accident.
Excellent. Thank you, Nathan. I think that's going to round us up for this evening's webinar. I'd just like to thank everyone for attending. We've loved having you on board. We're going to sign off now. Just to remind you all of the weekly masterclasses that we have at the Barbican Theatre. Next week we have fantastic. Sorry, on Thursday, the 4th of Feb, we have Who Said You Can't and Why You Shouldn't Believe Them by ULA Jackson from Rising Arts Agency, and I would urge anyone to definitely come along to that one because that's going to be absolutely fascinating. And then we also have on the 11th of February, we have a really exciting webinar from two fabulous filmmakers, Brett Harvey and John Crooks, who will be taking your Q&A questions all about guerrilla filmmaking and what it's like to create films on absolutely no budget. And we've also got plenty more planned in the future. From me and from Nathan, I'd like to thank you very much. And we'll hopefully see you all again in the future.
And please do donate if you can or you feel able to. It's a really good program.